I'm really very happy to be here with you today, and I would like in the very beginning to congratulate the organizers for the idea and the capacity to set up this wonderful event that brought us together. I have not brought slides with me, although I had the intention, but was very much hesitant whether to put it on more concrete examples rather than to draw a general frame. But anyway, with regards to Bulgaria, I have brought the book that I have authored some time ago, so if you're interested you can have a glimpse of some of the examples that I'm working for several years already on the project of socialist monuments in Bulgaria, the fate that they have passed through and they keep on passing through in the period already of 25 years after the political changes. The topic of the title of my paper today is the socialist heritage, or the heritage of socialism in Bulgaria, or with a general reference to Eastern Europe, also theoretical and methodological challenges. And this the paper and that I'm going to present is part of a wider book project that I'm currently undertaking. The topic itself is very general, and it would really be very difficult to encompass it within the framework of one paper. That's why currently I would outline only several major theoretical and methodological issues related to the interpretation of the period of socialism through the lens of the concept of heritage. And in the paper I would just draw the attention to social and cultural layers related to this period, analyzing the challenges of their interpretation as heritage. Through the prism of the understanding of heritage as something which is given and is unavoidably perceived as bequeathed by the past, or as value which has to be taken and brought forth to the future. Let me start with several major general considerations related to the concept of heritage. The last 3 decades testified to a very significant growing up of the research dedicated to various aspects of cultural heritage, of its interpretation as value for the contemporary society, and of the measures of its protection, safeguarding in the context of the changing natural and cultural environment. Just as a point of reference, let me remind here about that this concept was in a very powerful way propped out and promoted already in the pioneering research of Eric Hobsbawm and Terence Ranger about the invention of traditions in different national and post-colonial states, and it was furthermore taken up in the detailed analysis in the works of David Lowenthal and his interpretations about the crusades of heritage that contemporary societies are facing and following. The problem about the place of heritage in contemporary world is a point of attention of a wider circle of researchers from different disciplines. This is something that we need to be very sensitive about and just to pay due attention. So it's social and cultural anthropology, history, sociology of tourism, regional studies, etc., area studies, which are, claiming their part, their share in researching this issue of this problem of heritage. And similarly to concepts such as tradition, memory and identity, which in different periods of the 20th century passed through its apogee to turn nowadays into widely used terms without very much concrete and particular content that might be related to only one scholarly discipline. In a similar way, the concept of heritage also passes through its constant gradual widening up of the quantitative horizon, and adding new types and subtypes of what heritage is, adding new legislative and administrative documents and measures, and turning itself into a point of media and social interest. The diverse research which are dedicated to heritage as a theoretical problem are related to the new social and cultural realities in the 20th century and the beginning of the 21st century, but let me just promote here some of the debates about whether heritage and this mass interest into what heritage is can be perceived as a cultural expression of nostalgia, as a point to signify the discontinuity with previous traditions and previous cultural practices, or also as an indicator of the symbolic capital which might serve to illustrate the movable, mobile, constantly changing cultural boundaries into the contemporary world, where a world in which tourism and cultural industries have a special place, further growing on special place in the sphere of economy. Just as a point to add here, before moving concretely to socialist heritage, let me say that in the last more than a decade, certainly there has been the overall policy of UNESCO, and starting already in the 70s, about material and tangible heritage, and in the last decade mostly focusing on the intangible cultural heritage, focusing particularly on the aspects of heritage which bear universal value and are something that might pretend to have world significance and world acknowledgement. Saying all these things, just let me put a very sharp point here that there is a very specific and a very outlined difficulty to apply almost any of these issues with what we may wish to term socialist heritage and heritage of socialism. And this difficulty results and rubs shoulders in many of the political and social circumstances in the first post-socialist decade already, when in all East European countries after 1989 there started enormous debates about the meaning and scope of what has been received as heritage or as a legacy of the socialist period, and what can and should or should not be reproduced in the post-socialist realities, what can and should or should not be embraced to and taken up into the post-socialist world, and what can be taken up by the societies of the 90s and the years that follows. There has been numerous examples, and in the papers that we already have been presented, and in the cases of the East European countries, from all of these countries we can see many such examples of destruction, of dismantlement, of forgetting, of purposeful brushing down and cleansing of the space of references to the socialist and communist period, and all these are being very, very strong and very sharp in the first post-socialist decade. Many of them continue and keep on being reproduced as overall practices until nowadays. And saying all these things, let me just add to a very critical tension on a terminological level that we need to be sensitive with relationship to socialist heritage, particularly the one which is related to the double bound meaning of heritage, and this This finds expression in the languages of the different countries, in the different languages in a different way. But in the English language, it sounds most, palpably expressed with the tension between the terms of legacy and heritage, the two major terms to relate and to name, to term the practices and cultural background bequeathed from the past. Of course, I'm not opening the word of the word about the term patrimony here, because it has another scope as well, but still the terms heritage and legacy in the English language bear this critical tension between the cultural practices and cultural backgrounds that societies or individuals may wish to take up and to reproduce and to valorize in the future, covering in this respect the term of heritage and legacy as something that may not be necessarily bound and associated with intentions of promotion and continuation. Pointing out this tension between the terms, I would like to emphasize that in the first years after the end of the communist period in Eastern Europe, almost all the research, anthropological, historical, sociological research from Western anthropologists, historians, sociologists on Eastern Europe about the communist period and the transition period bound the period and what was associated with it under the term of legacy. Those aspects, those practices that could be perceived as heavily burdening, laying on the shoulders of East European societies, and it was only in the beginning of the 21st century when this terminological horizon started being broken through by attempts to see all the practices bequeathed from the socialist period as possible to be termed as practices falling within the scope of heritage. What were the major challenges and what are the major challenges about what socialist heritage is? What does it, and this is an issue that we are constantly facing, what does it include? What is the scope that it opens to us? Visual references to the recent past, politically framed references, cultural traces to the recent past. Does it involve the organization of social life and all these social practices that are being continuing in one way or another in the post-socialist period? Do we involve here the institutions and the system of power, which no matter how changed and how Europeanized, may still bear much of the socialist background and the traditions that have shaped or in many cases have generated them? Do we involve here industrial heritage and heritage that is related to working contexts and industrial contexts? Do we involve ecological, environmental heritage as within a term of socialist heritage? And of course, not least and not the only one that remains unmentioned so far, aside from the memorial objects, do we involve here also as heritage the memories, the thoughts, the patterns of perceptions? Yes, I know. Saying all these, the difficulties to conceptualize what socialist heritage is, let me mention just several paradoxes around it, just before closing. The paradoxes that outline it as something that is both past and still present. No matter that we are within half a century after the end of the socialist period, we still keep on terming, at least in Bulgaria, but my observations prove it to many other contexts in Eastern Europe, we still term the socialist communist period as a recent past. So it's both far and near. It is both something that societies need to forget, and something that they need to remember, and they keep on remembering and reactivating in their memories. It is both shared and nobody's. Let me just point out here the reluctance of state institutions to embrace state policies of its maintenance and maintaining projects, even of whether artistic or related to maintaining some of the contexts and cultural references related to this period. It stimulates reservations because of its political embeddedness, but it also stimulates difficulties to conceptualize in the new contemporary context. And as a last point to conclude with relationship to heritage, let me again going deep into a terminological reference. Let me remind that heritage is deeply embedded with what the term heir is and what the term heir has to say about heritage. To have heritage, we have to have heirs, able and willing to embrace it, to have heirs that would accept what is being bequeathed to them, and not to reject what has come down from the past, no matter that in many circumstances, in different contexts, heirs may not know what exactly to do with what has come from their ancestors. Thank you very much.